Welcome to the Peace and Possibilities podcast. This is Julie Bruns, and you are about to be inspired. I am so excited to share my conversations with amazing people from all walks of life who figured out how to be happy, peaceful, and content doing work they love and making the world a better place so that you can see what's possible for your life. I can't wait to hear what you think. Send me an email and let me know one thing you're taking away from this episode. And never forget, anything really is possible. Welcome to this episode, everyone. I am here with Mindy Stone-Szabo. Hi, Mindy.
Hi, how are you?
Good. I'm glad to have you. So I met Mindy on a webinar. So what I do, Mindy, I do a lot of different work, and I'm starting a new role soon. But even in between all this other stuff I do, I love keeping up with training, learning, and development topics and leadership topics. So I'm always going to webinars. I've been doing this my whole career, but really a lot in the last couple of years because there's so much new stuff out there. And you were presenting on a webinar that I was on. You can say the name of it if you want. I forget the name of it.
It was Wellness in the Workplace.
Wellness in the Workplace, which is
through the CLO organization.
Yeah, and I love the concept, and I've been working on wellness in the workplace for a couple of years. So I love just having that in the title was pretty cool, and that drew me in. You were one of the speakers, and then I reached out to you because I love meeting people that love what they do. I've met a lot of people through these workshops, and it's not even my intention. I just go on to learn stuff, and then I take notes and take what works and leave the rest. But then I've been recently, like over the last 6 months, always meeting cool people, but sometimes I'll reach out and ask people, and other times I'm like, no, that was cool, but I don't necessarily want to talk to you more. And I was like, I want to find out more about what Mindy does and how she figured it out. And you obviously love what you do, which is why you're on the podcast. So thanks for being here.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I love like-minded people who want to bring out the best in other people and talk about positivity and optimism. Definitely in the world we're in right now, there's a lot of doom and gloom. And so this is kind of a feel-good chance to just reflect on the things that we're grateful for.
Yes, for sure. Good. Yes, this is exactly why I do it. This is my little I get up every day and every week and think about how I can make the world a little bit better and show people what's possible, which is why I have a podcast. And it's my way of being the change instead of just complaining about something.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's start with what you do. So I know you're in learning development. You can tell people what you do. I really want to know, I know what you do now, but I really want to know, like, did you always have a career in this? Or did you do something else and then you really got into the learning development space?
It's a great question because I think that the learning and development space, especially in the corporate world, is kind of this unknown secret that people tap into by coincidence. And many of us started in other occupations and then somehow found our way here, which is exactly what happened to me. I can't say that I ever thought I would be here. When I was a kid, I was never one of those kids that knew what I wanted to be when I grew up.
No.
I really didn't think much about my future at all. And we still laugh to this day, my parents and I, that I was a junior in college before my counselor brought me in and said, "You haven't declared a major yet."
You've taken how many classes and you still what do you take? Yeah.
That's how unsure I was about what I wanted to be when I grew up. And so my question to him was not, can I have some time to soul search? It was, how many credits do I have in each content area?
Yeah.
And
so
what do I have the most in?
Yeah.
And he said, well, it looks like psychology and sociology are your favorite classes. And I went, done. Psychology is my major.
Oh my gosh.
And,
so funny.
that's just silly kind of, but at the same time, I think that that's just kind of who I am. I kind of live just in the moment, and I do some planning, but I don't think too much about what I'm going to be doing in 10 years because so much changes, and I know that. And that's always been my life, is constant change. It's the one constant thing. And I kind of embrace it and I love it. And so I don't really fear change like a lot of people do.
I'm the same way. I find that's a common trait with people in learning development and
Mm-hmm.
they like change. And
It's so
as
true.
I've been interviewing for new roles over the last year, that's like a lot of people are thrown off by it and like repulsed by it. Not just like, I don't like it a little bit, but like, I don't like it at all. I can't imagine having a life, work or otherwise, where there was none at all. I've always been really, it's always appealed to me. And but learning development, it's constantly changing. And the whole point of learning new things every day, showing other people what's new getting new perspectives, all of that. It's fascinating and it's exciting. And I find that that's definitely a commonality with people that are in this profession.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. I see that all the time.
And obviously you knew something about that because you were studying a lot of psychology and sociology in college.
Well, right. So I had always had an inkling to study more of it. And then when it came down to having a couple jobs that I didn't like, I found out quickly my non-negotiables for like, I do not want to be a part of that environment in the work world. I worked for like Arthur Andersen. I did some internships with Xerox. I worked for, if you remember MCI, the phone company back in the day, I did some outbound telemarketing sales, and that was a nightmare. And I realized quickly after driving home one day crying in tears because my other friends had figured out their lives at 25 and I hadn't, that I needed to go back to school and get my teaching certificate because that's really what I loved. I came from a family of educators and I swore I would never be a teacher. And then go figure, that is really what, I don't know if it's genetic or what, but that's what drove me to really my passion for education. My mom had asked me, what have you done in your life that you really love? And what do you think you're good at? And everything went back to coaching or refereeing little league sports or working with the Special Olympics or working with kids of some age, helping people. And she's like, well, looks like you're stuck.
But
so I got into teaching
so many things. Like it's not just teaching in a school. I have a teaching degree too. It was just like you. I was my junior year and I was like, I think I want to change my major, but I didn't want to change it and redo and be in college for 2 or 3 more years without a master's degree. So I just finished my marketing and economics degree. Then I went to school and got my master's in teaching and a certificate because I was like,
funny how that works, huh?
Yeah, isn't that funny?
Yeah.
So I'm smart that she was asking you those questions instead of just
it really helped guide me in what I wanted to do because I was feeling really lost at that time. And so I did. I went back, I did my student teaching in elementary school and realized, ooh, not for me. Older kids are probably better off served with my sarcasm and sense of humor. I'd probably make the little ones cry and that's not good.
I'm like, there's all this whining. I did the same thing. I was teaching. I said to my husband, I'm like, oh my gosh. Like I spent the day saying that's not really very nice, or they're tattletaling. I'm like, what is going? I'm like, I can do it.
Right?
It's a special person for sure.
It does take a special person, and my friends who are younger, who teach younger kids, they said, "Oh, you're a special person to teach high schoolers." And junior high, and I'm like, no, you're a special person to teach the little ones. Trust me, because the little ones have excuses to behave the way they do. The high schoolers, I don't know.
Yeah, it's tough, but it definitely you're definitely one or the other. I have friends that are teachers. And one or the other. Okay,
so I spent almost 20 years doing that, teaching
in schools
in the classroom. Yeah, almost 20 years, and then I left and realized there was a whole world out there of learning and development. Again, that had been hidden for years. I didn't even know existed, and I'm so glad that I did dig in and learn more about it. And that's what really prompted me to move out to the Northwest from Denver with my family about almost 7 years ago. And I took the job that I'm in now with Papa Murphy's, and I started as a senior manager, just getting my feet wet, and was able to build 2 different training programs for a franchise community and a corporate environment. And now I serve as the VP for learning and development for Papa Murphy's, and the rest is history. It's really been cool.
Awesome. Hold on one second. Okay. That's very cool. So I didn't expect you to say that you taught for that long in schools, because I went and taught for a little bit, and then I was like, I don't want to teach in schools. I know I want to teach older kids. Do I want to teach adults? And then the light bulb went off, and that's the year I was in Arizona, and I'm like, I want to teach in business, in corporate America. And then I became a software trainer. So it's just so funny that people are, and I almost all the people that I met in the software training world or the training world, corporate training world, have some sort of teaching background. They either have a degree and went right into it like me, or they were teachers for a while. They thought they wanted to be teachers, whatever, but that's also common. So that's funny, the teaching thing comes coming back. Okay, so now you're in learning development. Take me into like so as you were a teacher, and you obviously loved it because you did it for 20 years. I hope you loved it, because
I did.
20 years you don't like, right?
I did.
So what were you doing along the way to stay peaceful, happy, content, and satisfied, because obviously the work is very satisfying, but I know my friends that are teachers and administrators, it's usually the parents and all the administrative stuff that's like, that weighs on you and makes it a little bit harder to love your job. How are you doing that? And how do you do it now to keep peaceful and content?
It's a great question. And I think as I reflect back on the years that I taught, it was a lot about self-care and knowing your boundaries of what you could and couldn't take on, as far as just loading your plate up. Because I think as teachers, we want to go in with this dream that we can save everyone and we can help every kid. And the reality quickly hits that in a class of 35, shoot, I had classes of 43, that, so many kids in your class filling the rooms. And if you can reach out to 6 of them, you've done well.
Yeah.
And that was a really hard reality for me to accept. And as I grew as a teacher, I grew as a person to understand that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
Because if you've made a significant difference in the lives of a few, then you win.
Yeah, it's better than
and that's victory.
Better than not trying at all. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so it is hard though, because there are those that you can't reach and you don't feel like you made a difference. And it is frustrating and you expect more from yourself. And you can get into that negative space when you do expect so much from yourself.
Yeah.
But you have to sit back and just be grateful of the lives that you were able to impact in a positive direction and really focus on that. Yeah. And that's really where it is for me today, is I really take time to focus on the positive in my life and not the negative so much. I don't ignore the negative. I don't like toxic positivity. I don't think there's any room for that. It's very toxic.
What do you mean toxic? I haven't heard that term, toxic positivity.
Toxic positivity for me, it's, I think about people who they shove things under the rug to not deal with them. And then everything else is just happy and rainbows and roses and ladybugs and flowers. And that's just not the world we live in. I want to be a positive, realist of, okay, the reality is this. It's not all great and it's not always going to be great, but we can make good out of it and it will turn out okay. But we don't ignore it.
Right.
We still have to deal with it head on.
Yeah.
Whatever challenges may come. And so that was something that I learned just being in the classroom for so many years, that you just really have to embrace those positive moments because sometimes they're far and few between.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're not concentrating on them, you don't feel them as much, you don't create more of that energy, and then you forget and then you're just focusing on the negative, which never really adds to any solutions anyways.
Right.
It's not helpful to you or to the people you're trying to impact, the kids or even in the corporate world.
That's right.
Yeah, it's not how it works. Yeah.
Yeah. And also I would say in the schools, sometimes you'll find that other teachers are the ones that you need to gravitate towards more than others, because that negativity, the story that they write in their own heads, they will put out there for you to be a part of. Misery loves company. And there's disgruntled teachers out there. I mean, I get it. But when you're around that, you become that. And so you have to separate yourself some way, whether it be physically or emotionally, you have to separate yourself from that negativity.
Find the people that are positive. That's just been a big theory of my life too, my work life and my personal life, is that I don't ask a lot of people's opinions before I meet other people, or if I'm interviewing for a role and I want to know what the company's like, I wouldn't ask a million people before I met people there. I'd meet people there first. And then I'd say, here's what I'm thinking. What else? Do you know anything else about it? So I can get the whole picture. But I never know what they're going to share. And if it's negative, it might just be that person's view with one person at the company or whatever it is. Yeah. And now you're swayed in a negative way, and your experience is going to be totally different. And you might not have even ever found the positive thing or whatever, because now you're going in there with this preconceived notion. And so I've made it a life habit not to do that. Yes. And maybe I'm not as informed as I should be, and maybe I end up being a little naive, but I'd rather be naive and positive than sure and negative, which really isn't even sure, because you could get in there and have a completely different experience than the other person that you talk to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I remember every year we used to, coming into fall, we'd get our class rosters, and teachers from the previous year would want to give us information about those kids that were on our roster. The exact same thing, and be like, I really don't want to know this.
Yeah, they're going to be a problem.
I really don't.
Parents, it's like, yeah, don't tell me. Maybe I want to.
Yeah, I want those clean slates. I want to form my own opinion about those people. Yeah.
So smart, so smart. And it keeps you happier and more positive. And then it helps the students more because they're not going in either with this preconceived notion from this random person they've never even laid eyes on that already thinks in a negative way about them. That's not helping anyone. And shame on those teachers for doing that. Like, and they're probably thinking they're being helpful.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I don't think it's ill-intended at all.
Yeah. I mean, but they're like, oh yeah, it's going to be a pain or whatever. It's like, how do you know that? There's no way of 100% knowing that. Yeah. Let's think about it in a positive way.
And I always remember, every man's trash is another man's treasure. And that comes to people too.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly. It definitely relates to people too. Okay. So do you get in your new role now? I'm guessing you get a lot because you're building programs and stuff in the corporate world. Do you get a lot of questions about what people can do to have a meaningful career and career advice and stuff like that? Do you give a lot of it? And what's kind of some of your favorite things?
Yeah, we do a lot of professional development sessions around that. And we focus a lot on just the neuroscience and psychology, brain work around being in the right place at the right time in your life, and thinking positively about your career and how you can build better, stronger teams who support you and lift you up, and you can lift them up as well if you're a leader. And so we do talk about that a lot at work, and we base a lot of our sessions on just the cognitive processes around how do we function together as groups, especially now that we've all gone remote. And for us, our company has no plans to go back to the building that we, are headquartered in anytime soon, if at all. And so it has really changed the way that we interact with each other and communicate with each other. And so a lot of what we talk about is, what does our job look like now compared to what it looked like 2.5 years ago? Yeah. And it is very different. Yeah. And so that's been a really interesting part of my role, having those conversations to get managers to lead their teams differently and as effectively, but in different ways. Yeah.
It's the main question for everyone now, and it's the topic of all these workshops that I've been on with CLO and HR, all these different organizations and groups I'm part of. It's like everyone's talking about the same thing, which is what does it all look like now, and how can we best serve the people that we're leading? What advice can we give to younger people that are going into this world that we've never, it's new to, well, it's not really even new to me because I worked remotely for years. I heard you say you worked at Arthur Andersen. I worked at Avanade, which was part of Accenture and Microsoft. They're still around, but that was a whole remote job for me for 4 years before the pandemic even hit. So we were always doing kind of things that we're talking about now, but it was foreign to a lot of people. Or I love the people that are like, oh, we could never let people work from home, and then like they didn't have a choice, and then they saw how good it was. And I'm a big proponent of being live and with people, and I know that, but the hybrid version and whatever it can be, you need to be able to connect, and the whole camera stuff is great now too, because before it was like we just get on calls and no one ever turned their camera on because it was just common. But I'm like, we weren't ever really connecting with people, so I'm glad that everyone's whether they're making you do it or not. It's like, I made a joke with someone recently. Oh, I was doing a workshop and I'm like, no, well, we don't require it, but we recommend it. I go, if we were in live, no one could come into the meeting and turn their chair around and not look at anyone. Yes. Like, why can't we look at people? Like, that's what I always say. You don't look your best. So look better if you want. Don't look your best, but we're paying people to be there at work. I agree. I'm all about like, people like, well, maybe they're not comfortable. Well, they had a job before and they had to come into the office and sit at a desk and go into a meeting. And I mean, like, you're being paid. It's so true. Yeah, right? It's like, yeah, I wasn't allowed to just put a piece of poster board over my face in the middle of a meeting. Look at me now. Or be real. I didn't get ready for this. I'm sorry, it was last minute. That's a whole different conversation. If I put a meeting on your schedule and you weren't expecting it, and so you weren't, you just got back from your lunch and you were running. Right. But this whole like, we're not gonna require it. I'm like, I don't think that's right. Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? So, okay, let's talk about a couple of final questions for you. Well, you can answer one or two, doesn't matter. If Is there anything you wish you'd learned earlier in your life or career? And like, what's one new thing you're taking away from our conversation today that just came up for you?
Oh, let's see. So what I wish I'd learned earlier in my life, I think for me, it was to not take myself so seriously. And I'm glad that I was able to figure that out over time, that I can laugh at myself, and I'm totally okay with that. And I can be a really entertaining person for myself.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with the mistakes I make now, and I'm okay with my flaws now, because I realize everybody has flaws and everybody makes mistakes, and there's no such thing as perfection. And it kind of makes life more fun when you can laugh at yourself and be silly and embarrassing. And that's kind of what I just love about people who can laugh at themselves. I laugh with them because I'm the same way, right?
You're teaching other people to be, when you are that way about yourself, you're teaching other people that it's okay.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah. And you're giving that acceptance of, I'm not judging you, because I've certainly made enough mistakes in my life. I'm not judging you. And yet at the same time, I take my work really seriously.
Of course.
Right. And I am a high achiever, and I like to get in there, and I like to compete, and I really drive for results. And so that can be a very serious place for me, but the rest of it doesn't need to be serious. It can be light and fun.
Right.
So I wish I had known how to do that earlier in my career. I think teaching did allow me to get a sense of humor faster than maybe other careers.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have a sense of humor when you're teaching, you're kind of hosed.
Right. Yeah. I always struggled with when I was substitute teaching and student teaching, and like when I would, especially with younger kids, and I make a joke and they just look at me with this blank thing. And I discovered it very quickly, like you did. I'm like, I'm sarcastic, and I like that dry sense of humor, and it's going right over their heads. I'm never going to be able to connect with them on that level. Nothing bad about it. I was just like, it would be more fun if I could just get a little quick wake or a little funny, or whatever. I'm like, it's not going to happen. There's much more pleasure in working when you have that humor and that camaraderie in that way.
Yeah,
for sure, especially the older ones. Yeah.
And did you ever hear the podcast from Liz Gilbert? I think I heard it on like Oprah Super Soul one time when I was on the treadmill at the gym. I remember this moment. It was the hummingbird versus the jackhammer.
I've heard of it. I probably have, but it may have been a long time ago. Refresh my memory.
It's called, like, I think it's called like chase your passion and maybe you'll find, or don't chase your passion and maybe you'll find it. And it was this thing of like, when we're little, did you grow up to be what you thought you wanted to be when you were little? And some people, it's only like 5% of the population actually grow up to be what they thought they would be. And they had this mission in life and this drive, and that's all they went for. And they were that jackhammer, right? And it's find your passion and just go with it.
Yeah.
And I think that we, growing up, all tend to think like, that's the way to be. I want this one thing, and I'm going to be it, and I'm going to go to school for it, and I'm going to get a career in it, and then that's going to be my lifelong journey. And then there's the hummingbirds, which are really most of the population, of us feeling bad because we're floating from one thing to the next thing, and we're moving so rapidly, and we're jumping over here, and then we're jumping over here, and then we're changing careers, and we're changing jobs, and we're changing roles. And we feel guilty because we don't feel like we're solid enough and serious enough, and we're not driven enough, and we're not passionate enough. And really what I learned when I remember listening to this podcast of, it's okay to be a hummingbird, because hummingbirds are beautiful creatures and they've been around for millions of years. So there's something to be said about that. And they do wonderful things for our environment. And there's some beauty in floating from thing to thing to thing to thing, and never stopping, because you're always exploring, and you're always out for the adventure, and you're always out to learn new things and find new spots to discover and find new places. And for me, I wish I had learned that earlier, that in being a hummingbird, it was a beautiful thing, and to embrace that, and to, like, I wish I could have taught that to more students who were kind of struggling with that.
Yeah.
Right. And I didn't know how to articulate that to them then. And the minute I heard that analogy of a jackhammer and a hummingbird, I'm like, oh my God, where's this been my whole life? I'm a hummingbird.
I love that.
And
like
I
you said,
love
most
being a
people are, and
hummingbird.
most people are very quick
Yes.
to decide at a young age or in high school, I'm going to do this and then go do it. Or even if they do, I bet those 5% that actually do aren't necessarily 100% happy. Like, I'm going to be a doctor or a lawyer, then they go and do it. And I bet if I had to put money down, that they're not even loving it like they thought they were going to love it. Because they made a decision based on something they were way too young. Their minds were not all the way, they didn't have enough experience to know that was going to bring them what they thought was going to bring them.
Yeah. So it's an interesting thing. I mean, I think that when I look at my parents' generation, for example, they had longevity in their careers at one particular company. It was very typical for them to stay at a company for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
And so that kind of was that mindset that at least I had of, why am I not doing this? Why am I always having to move? Why am I always why am I always bored? Why do I always need a new challenge? Why do I always need to push myself somewhere else?
Why is it a bad thing that I need to change? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the new world we're in now really embraces that, which I love.
Yeah. And it's going to be that way for the kids that I have my, one already graduated from college, the other one's in the middle of it now. And it's like, that's my, one of my cousins was telling me, he's like, there's going to be like, growing up we were, one job every, 5 to 10, 8 years or something like that. Then they're going to have like one job. They're going to be switching jobs 4 or 5 times in their career. With us, it was like a couple of times throughout their life, but it's going to be a lot different. And I like that it's embraced too. Yeah. Okay, one final question for you. Yeah. What's one new thing you're taking away from our conversations today?
I think for me, it is just a reminder that there are other like-minded individuals that we have to connect with always and seek new perspectives and new ideas on this positive level to be able to have these conversations about what can we do to make each other better and how can we lift each other up in a time that's not always very fun.
Love it. Yeah, and doing this every day, no matter what way whether it's reading an article, listening to a webinar, listening to a podcast, I do it every day too. There's always something new to learn or to remember, like you said with that story. I think I've heard that story, and now I'm going to probably go try to find that whole thing. But you summed it up beautifully, so I don't really even need to listen to it again. But it's nice because you go, okay, that's a great analogy. And in my new role, I'm going to be a career development coach. I'll be able to help, remind kids about that. It's like, not only is it not normal to make one decision and stick with it for the rest of your life. It's not good. It's not the norm, and it's okay. Yeah. Because most people don't. That's not how life works. And if you can be more open to it, then the things that you're gonna discover will come faster instead of you, like you said, being a jackhammer. Because when you're a jackhammer, because I was doing that a lot in my career too. I'll just do this, then I'll do that. You have your blinders on, not even necessarily closed-minded, I was going to say, but your blinders are on because you're like, no, I'm going to this thing. It's like, instead you missed these other things over here that may have been clues to something that was going to turn you another way, but you were not open to it because you thought I have to do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mindy. I took a lot of good notes, and you had some great wisdom and insight, so I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Really glad I reached out, and I'm happy to stay connected, and I'm looking forward to following you in your career and hearing about the new cool things you're doing.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Mindy. All right, take care, everyone. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks for listening. I hope you loved this episode. Don't forget to like us, subscribe, review, and share it. I hope you were truly inspired. And for a little more inspiration, don't forget to pick up my book, Peace, Possibilities, and Perspective: 8 Secrets to Serenity and Satisfaction in Your Life and Career. I can't wait to get you love in your life.